she neared the store, Peggy could see there were still a few cars parked outside. When she was growing up, the store was called McBride's and had been little more than a 6-aisle grocery store. Over the past 30 years, Odell had expanded the store, changing the name with each remodel. 10 years ago, it became McBride's Market, then 5 years ago, Save More. Peggy parked, jumped out, and rushed inside. She grew lightheaded and stopped to take a couple long breaths. Odell McBride, an exceedingly pleasant man in his early 60s, made eye contact with her. He was checking out the last of the customers. Tarrin being a small town of just 2,000, Peggy knew both men in line and waved hello. "Hi, Jack." "Hi, Dr. Lanningham," she said, then turned to Odell and asked, "Can I grab something really quick?" "Sure, but make it snappy," he replied with a soft wink. "I will," she promised, and started toward the medicine aisle. She passed a woman standing near one of the other two checkout lanes. The woman was wearing a cowboy hat and had her face buried in a gossip magazine. Though Peggy recognized her from town, she couldn't recall her name. In the medicine aisle, Peggy grabbed a box of Theraflu and some throat lozenges, then made her way back up front. Odell had finished with Jack and was checking out Dr. Lanningham, Peggy's longtime veterinarian. Behind Dr. Lanningham was a young man in his mid-20s whom Peggy recognized from the lumber yard. He asked, "You got it too?" She glanced down into his basket and saw a similar assortment of medicines. "Yeah," she said. "Hit me hard about 30 minutes ago." The front doors opened and a man walked in. Neil Felding. Peggy and he had gone to high school together. He'd been valedictorian, if she remembered correctly. She heard he'd recently moved back, though this was the first time she'd seen him. Right behind Neil was a second man. The hairs on Peggy's arm pricked. It wasn't the gun in the man's hand, though that was frightening enough. It was the look on his face. Rage. He smashed the butt of the gun into Neil's back, sending him flailing into a bin filled with an assortment of Halloween merchandise. "Lowry," yelled Odell, "what the hell are you doing?" Lowry Barnes, Peggy realized. He was in his late 20s, thinning brown hair, freckles, vacant brown eyes. The last time Peggy had seen him was 3 weeks earlier, when he'd still been working at Save More and had bagged her groceries. Peggy wasn't sure why he'd been fired, but she assumed it was either drugs or alcohol. At least that's what landed Lowry in jail, or so went the gossip. "Over here!" Lowry screamed, waving the gun. "Everybody over here!" Odell, Dr. Lanningham, the woman in the cowboy hat, the young man from the lumber yard, Neil and Peggy, everybody. "You don't have to do this, Lowry," Dr. Lanningham said calmly. He was in his late 50s, with a head of salt and pepper hair. It was the same voice that had told Peggy it was time to put her golden retriever, Betty, to sleep. "Yes, I do," Lowry screamed. He pointed the gun at Odell and said, "You never should have fired me. You should have just given me a warning or something." "I did give you." "No, you just threw me out on the street." Odell didn't answer. "Now move, everyone, to the back of the store." Peggy waited for someone to dart toward the door or make a run into one of the aisles. No one did. Everyone obeyed. Everyone but Peggy. Her legs seemed incapable of moving. Lowry pointed the gun at her chest and shouted, "I said move." The young man from the lumber yard gave her a reassuring nod, then took her arm and guided her toward the rest of the group. Lowry ushered the 6 of them to the back of the store and into the freezer bay. It was the size of a small bedroom, half filled with frozen items. Lowry told him to sit on the floor, and Peggy fell to the cold concrete. The young man was to her left, Dr. Lanningham to her right. Lowry stood in front of them. "I didn't deserve it," he said. He pointed the gun at Odell and pulled the trigger. Odell's head flopped backward, and he fell to his side. Peggy screamed. Lowry pulled the trigger again, the bullet hitting the young man next to her in the throat. Peggy closed her eyes and said a quick prayer. It would be her last. Chapter 1. Friday, May 27, 2016. Seattle, Washington. I got fat. Capital F, capital A, capital T, fat. There were a lot of variables: lack of exercise, Netflix, that new Dairy Queen blizzard with all the fudge in the center, but those all came after the fact, after Gina moved back to Bolivia.